today we're going to talk about using technology in physical education. And this is really an overview and gives you some sample ideas of how we actually might integrate technology into physical education lessons. So it's really just an overview. So, one of the things that I want to stress is this idea of purposeful use of technology. A lot of times when I talk to teachers, they talk about using technology when they're evaluated or because they know that it's good, but they might not have what we call purposeful use of the technology. So they're just using technology to use technology and not as a purposeful tool to increase learning, or they don't have any good reason why they're actually using it. So, a couple of reasons why we might actually want to use technology. Well, in physical education, there's a lot of technology that can help increase moderate to vigorous physical activity. And one of the links that we see in relation to academic achievement, the research tells us that moderate to vigorous physical activity has a link to increased academic performance. And so increasing MVPA is really important. The other thing that might happen when you use technology is that you increase your student motivation. So the idea here is that if you can increase your student motivation, students are more likely to participate and they're going to be getting more physical activity and learning more in your classroom. Technology can also be used as a valid and reliable tool to assess effort and participation in your class. Instead of just guessing if students are doing a good job in your class, or watching your students and then subjectively measuring them, you actually have a way to objectively measure effort and participation by using technology. You're also able to analyze skill a little bit more effectively. The last couple of things is technology can actually make your life easier. So there's no shame in using technology to help you perform better in your classes. So if it's easier to take attendance and get it posted, then use technology to do that. Making your life easier is going to give your students a better experience. And then the last reason is that students love it and they use it every day. And so it can help you connect to them. It can help you relate to them as a teacher. If they see that you're trying to use the latest and greatest technology and you're using it in a purposeful manner, they might really like that and they might be able to relate to you a little bit better. So it's important that we use classroom management strategies to increase MVPA, and a lot of you should have learned about this in effective teaching. There are very basic things that you can do in order to increase MVPA in your classroom. Things like active attendance. So instead of coming down and sitting in lines when you first come out of the dressing room or when they first come in from their classroom teacher, you can have them do an instant activity. And then while they're doing an instant activity, you can take active attendance. You want to minimize and chunk your instructions. So this is helping you avoid long wait times. And so you want to give a little bit of instruction, get them moving. Give a little bit of instruction, get them moving. And then transitions are very, very important when we're talking about classroom management strategies to increase MVPA. You want your transitions to be quick, and you want to give clear directions of what the students are going to be doing. A lot of the time that we lose during class is through transitions and not giving chunked instructions very well. We might go on and on about the instructions that need to happen for the day to get them to the activity, but what we don't realize is that we just wasted like 6 minutes of the student's physical activity time. So the question is, do we really know how much activity our students are getting in our classes? Well, unless you measure it, you don't really know. And there's lots of different ways that you can measure it. So we can measure it by heart rate monitors. We can measure it by pedometers. If you're measuring physical activity outside of school, kids can use cell phone apps. They can use Fitbits, Polar Loop, a Polar A60, all of these things. And there's even tons more out there that have come out recently. The Nike Band, I think. There's a Google one. All of these devices are readily available and they're out there for your students. And a lot of your students already have them. So keep that in mind, that you can challenge them to get so many steps once they leave school, or you can challenge them to to have 60 minutes of physical activity outside of school because some of them might be able to measure that outside of school. So there's lots of research out there that talks about increasing student motivation and why it's so important in physical education. Your students become more aware of what's going on around them and what they're doing. They become more aware of their body, they become more aware of the motor skills that they're learning. It also gives them new challenge. And so, sometimes we have those students in our classes that think that they don't need to be in physical education. Maybe they play a lot of sports or they have a lot of experience in physical activity outside of school. And this gives them a new challenge. So if we're using pedometers in physical education and we're asking them to, come in and to get so many steps, then it gives them something to work towards. It also brings out a competitive nature in our students. And, sometimes I'm not a fan of being competitive, but I think that this has something to it. I mean, when we come in and we ask our students to put on a heart rate monitor, we ask them to put on a pedometer, it's holding them accountable, but then they're also trying to get more steps because they want to be better than their friend. And then the last thing is that it allows you to track both inside and outside of physical education. So if you're looking to have your students track their steps, they might be able to borrow a pedometer depending on how many you have, and they can wear it for a week and see how much steps they get in a normal week. And you could do that for all of your classes where they're borrowing pedometers for a week at a time, and they could do like a little science project with it. When do they get the most steps? What days do they get the most steps? Is it when they're at school? Is it during the weekend? All of these things are ways to get students involved and get them to want to be physically active and to be intrigued about physical activity. So one of the things that I really want to talk about is this idea of assessing effort and participation. And so oftentimes in physical education class, we assess on participation, and we assess on participation on whether they show up or not. And I have a really big issue with this because we don't grade people in math on if they showed up to class or not. That's just not the case. And so we're really downgrading our profession when we decide that, if a student dressed out, then they get full participation for that day. Or if they didn't sit out just because they're walking around and looking like they're participating, they get full participation for the day. That doesn't count in my book. And so I think that it's a really good thing to use pedometers or heart rate monitors in your class because you're able to objectively measure your students in your class. Subjective measure means that you're looking at them, you're guessing what their participation is, but there's no mistake with objective measurement. We're able to actually tell with heart rate monitors how students are, how much effort they're giving towards a particular activity. A student might look like they're not actually participating a lot, but their heart rate might be really high. And so that's why objective measurement is so important. When you're using technology to measure effort and participation, there's really no question that a student can come back and say, well, I worked hard. Well, no, you didn't. Your heart rate was only at 40% most of the time, and it needed to be between 60 and 80. So you're really holding your students accountable. I think the other thing that is important to understand is that it brings more value to your physical education class. If you can set goals for your students, if you can show that they are spending, 50% of their time in moderate to vigorous physical activity, your class is gonna it holds you more accountable as a teacher, but it also brings value to your class from an administrative standpoint. If they come in and they see that you're using technology, that you're teaching kids things about their own bodies, about their health, about how to be physically active for a lifetime, they're going to really value that instead of if they come in and you're playing dodgeball, that's not something that they're going to think kids are going to be able to use for the rest of their lives. Technology can also help us analyze skill more effectively. So thus far, we've talked about heart rate monitors, we've talked about pedometers to be able to analyze steps, but there's a lot of video type tools that can allow you to record your students and for your students to be able to analyze their skill more effectively. Students love to watch themselves, and really, if you teach them how to analyze using video, then you can create lifelong learners. Help students recognize exactly what they need to improve, because then you're teaching them to fish. You're not fishing for them. And if you can teach them to observe their body and to know what they're supposed to look like, and then they can see themselves on video, they're able to critique themselves, and they don't need you critiquing them. These are just three different things that I've seen video recording done in physical education. And so this first one is a little bit old school, but it totally works. So it's a TiVo. It's like a DVR machine, its own brand. And the first generation TiVos, you can actually hook up to a video recorder, and then the video recorder tapes the students. A TiVo can be set to delayed playback, so students can perform their skill, and then they come to the TiVo and they can watch it on slow motion. And it's a continuous feed, so they never have to touch buttons. So they perform their skill, they come right over the TiVo, they can analyze their own skill using a rubric, and it's as simple as that. They can go on to the next station. The next is iPads. So most students know how to use iPads or iPhones, and so they could record each other with a partner on a phone and then be able to play back and analyze their skill. The last one is an app, and on this app, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but you can actually do like analysis of angles and all kinds of things. It's called Coach's Eye, and a lot of coaches use it for football, for swimming, all kinds of different sports, but it can also be used in physical education. And so students can see how their body is actually aligned compared to the angles that are suggested that you should be performing their skills. So as I said earlier, you want to use technology to make your life easier. Technology is created to make everything more convenient. And think about it. So fast food, cars, like fast food's made to make it more convenient, to make sure that you can get food on the go. Cars help you get places faster. Well, mobile devices and apps are created for the same reasons. But it's important that you're using them to your advantage, and that you're using them often enough that it's not going to take up extra time. So one thing that happens that we see all the time in physical education is teachers say, oh, I'm going to use this because I'm getting evaluated and I want to make sure that my principal sees me using technology. Well, obviously that's not good teaching methods. Like, you want to be using technology all the time so that your kids are used to it, so that you're used to it, and not just when you're being evaluated. A lot of teachers complain about heart rate monitors and, oh, they take so long for the students to get on. But the reality is that if students are required to wear heart rate monitors every day, that time for them to put the heart rate monitor on is going to become more and more efficient. And eventually, after 2 weeks, the students are going to be able to put it on in less than a minute, and they're going to get on with their day. And so making sure that you're using it enough that it's not going to take up extra time is really important. Technology also helps you connect to your students. So I talked to that point already, but it's just really important to understand. So I'm going to introduce QR codes a little bit later, but this is an example of QR codes and how you can use them in physical education. And so this is a QR code skill poster that one of your fellow Wayne State graduates made for this technology and assessment class. And so this is an example of an assignment that you're going to be doing later on when we talk specifically about QR codes. And then this is another one. This is a physical activity club advertisement. And again, using the QR code. So I'll go into that in more detail at another time. So this is just talking about how QR codes are cool. I was in a training recently, and a gentleman was telling me how, he's a teacher in PE, and he uses QR codes all the time, and they even do it in the hallway as like physical activity breaks, so students can scan the poster and it gives them like a video of what to follow for physical activity breaks. So they have all of them posted all over the gym to show them skill work, but they also do things to be able to give them like quick, short physical activity breaks, which I thought was a really cool way to use it. All right, so we're going to talk about heart rate monitors, and um, you get introduced to heart rate monitors and fitness and instruction. So some of you are in that class now, and you're going to hear a lot more detail about this, but I can't talk in a technology and assessment class and not mention heart rate monitors. So I specifically here at Wayne State, we use Polar heart rate monitors, although there's a lot of different systems now. But Polar has systems that work with either a wrist-based unit, which does wrist-based heart rate, or they have a strap. And the strap has most commonly been used in schools because this wrist-based technology for Polar just came out last year. But what happens is it talks Bluetooth to the iPad, and then on the iPad you can see how all of your students are doing. And you even have the option to then display that iPad up on the screen. Now, some people say, oh my gosh, you cannot display everybody's heart rate up on the screen, and they make a really big deal about that. But essentially, it's not a big deal because really what you're going to have, instead of like most cases where you would have students who are obese singled out, the students who are obese are going to be able to get into their target heart rate zone faster. And so they're going to be able to achieve more in their target heart rate zone than their fit counterparts. And so there's really no need to hide names or not to show it on the wall because it's not really singling anyone out. But what you could do if people are worried about that, you can just put it up by ID number or number. The only thing that happens with that is, as a teacher, you then have to know everybody's number. And so that gets a little bit hard. Instead of me saying, oh, Erica, you need to pick it up a little bit. You know, you need to make sure that your heart rate's in between 60 and 80% of your max. I can't do that. I have to say, oh, number 5, you need to pick it up a little bit. And so it's just a little bit harder to hold your students accountable because you are going to have to memorize every student's number. Heart rate's really important though. It gives students immediate feedback. It's an objective assessment. We talked about motivation. It's going to hold your students and yourself accountable for your classwork. So this is really important. You know, we might set a goal to get 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity during our PE class, but the reality is that, you know, if we have a 45-minute PE class and we go through our lesson, sometimes the reason why students don't get in 20 minutes into their zone is because the teacher talked too much. So if our transitions were bad, if I gave really long instructions, if I kept stopping them and interrupting play to tell them things, these types of things are going to not allow students to be in their moderate to vigorous physical activity zone. And so making sure that you're not only holding your students accountable, but then you reflect on that lesson as a teacher and you try to hold yourself accountable. That's really important. Heart rate monitors can be used for safety as well. So there's stories of kids who, you know, used heart rate monitors in PE and actually found out that they had a severe heart condition, and they were then able to go to the doctor and get that checked out early, and nothing, you know, sad happened because they were wearing a heart rate monitor on a regular basis. I don't know how many of you heard of recently that Central Michigan football player that died after practice, and that was a heart-related condition. And just think, like, it might have been able to prevent a life if that child would have been wearing a heart rate monitor during practice or in physical education. So Polar GoFit is a software that Polar uses to run their heart rate monitor programs. And so it's important to know that it does both heart rate and activity monitoring. It can also do fitness assessment. It is web-based, but you don't have to have internet in order for it to work. And you can print all kinds of reports. So there's individual and then there's group reports. So if your principal wants to know, well, how are your students doing in PE? You can say, oh, well, let me print you a report of their heart rate from this last class. And you would be able to present data to your administrator in that manner, which is really powerful. GoFit app is recommended for indoor use, and it just goes right on the iPad. So iPads now are fairly inexpensive. You're talking $300 for an iPad mini and, you know, $450 for a regular iPad. So it's really not that bad. I already talked about the wrist base and the sensors, and so there's different types of sensors and straps that you can get. You know, there's lots of things that we need to talk about in regards to troubleshooting. And when you're in fitness and instruction, you're going to be able to troubleshoot these things live because you actually have to wear them. So you want to make sure that you wet the strap before you put it on, that you readjust it, you tighten it. If you can't get it to work after adjusting, tightening, and re-wetting it, then you might want to grab a different strap or try a different sensor. It's important to clean it, obviously, for safety reasons. And a lot of times what happens is school districts will have students purchase their own strap. So that costs $10 and it's with them from their freshman to their senior year. But then they're not having to worry about MRSA or other health-related issues that come when you're participating in activities with these soft straps, and then it doesn't go to another student. You have your own strap and you take it with you, and then the only thing that's interchangeable is a little peanut that snaps onto it. So when you're going to set it up, and you all will learn this in fitness and instruction, but again, I just want to show you, you can choose what their zone is. So between 70 to 100%, between 70 to 90%, between 60 and 80%, or if you want them free, and then you can set their target time. And then they earn badges according to that target time. So if I set 60 minutes, then I'm going to be able to earn essentially 6 badges throughout that time period. A couple of general heart rate information things that you need to know. The max heart rate, you could set it equivalent for everybody in your class, although that's not the best way to do it. There is a formula, 220 minus the age, that you could use as well. Also not the best way to do it. The best way is to do a VO2 max test, which isn't feasible for kids in physical education. But I mean, I think if you have kids who, if you set them at 220 minus their age, and then you realize that you have a kid that is at 100% all the time, you probably then need to raise his max heart rate, because if they're moving and they're able to talk and to move at a fast pace and they're over 100%, then that means that their max heart rate probably is a little bit higher than what you have it at the moment. The different target heart rate zones with 200 is 140 to 200, 140 to 80, 120 to 60. That's all based on that 200 count. And then I also want to talk a little bit about heart rate concepts. So resting heart rate is a heart rate that you have when you're in a resting state. So even if you've been moving in the last, 10 minutes, that's not a resting state. You need to lie down, close your eyes, be in a resting state, and then take your heart rate. Recovery heart rate is heart rate when you're working out and then you stop. It's the time that it takes to get from that peak heart rate when you stop to recovering your heart rate when you start, when you complete that, and then you're back down to your resting heart rate. So how much time does it take? That's recovery time for heart rate. And then training heart rate is like a target heart rate for what you want to train at. So you could be training for a half marathon, but your goal is to keep a training heart rate of 75% of your max. So you're never going to go above 75% when you're training. Here's different zones of how you feel. This is really good to talk through with kids. Because sometimes they don't know like what they're feeling. And so if you wear a heart rate monitor for a long enough period of time, then you're able to actually know what 80% of your max feels like. And so I train with a heart rate monitor all the time. And if I forget mine, it's so annoying, but I still pretty much know by how my body feels what zone I'm in. So this is just general information for classes. When you set up a class on the heart rate monitors, and I'm going to actually skip this right now because I don't think that you need to know per se. This is what it looks on the iPad when you're going to start a class, and then you can pick which class you want, and then you pick whether you want them in 60 to 100, if you want them 60 to 80, 70 to 90, whatever you would like. And then On the iPad, what you're going to see is you have your students' names. They're assigned to a number. And let's talk about that for a second. So numbering your sensors and making sure that you have a good classroom management system for your sensors is really important. The way that you distribute and collect your sensors could make or break a class. So if you're not good at distributing your equipment, or if you're not good at collecting it, then it could ruin all of the progress that you made during that class. So while it's running, you have different views that you can see. You have a target view, you have a heart rate view, and then you have a list view. So you can have your students looking at this while they're working out or going through the lesson. Here's a better view of that. That's target view. This is heart rate view. So target view is going to show you how many badges you've earned. That's how many sections of 10 minutes that you've been in your target heart rate zone. This is total number. This is total number of minutes that they are in the zone. And then if you go to heart rate view, this is the percentage of time that they're in. I'm sorry, percentage of max heart rate, and then their beats per minute. This is more of a list view, so you can see by student how much time they've spent in each zone, and then how many badges they've earned. So again, a badge is earned for every 10 minutes spent in target heart rate zone. So this student, for example, has spent 50 minutes in their target heart rate zone. This is an individual student data on iPad, so each of these different ones you can click on and get more details so you can show your students. And then this later can also be emailed to the student. You can do a course summary, so it'll tell you the percent of your students that actually reached your 60-minute target. This is a heart rate summary for the class. So you can see during your lesson how much time was spent in 50 to 60%, 60 to 70%, 70 to 80, 80 to 90, and 90 to 100. Same thing here. This is for one class, and it's looking at your different students. You can see how many were in the green, how many were in the yellow, how many were in the red at the different time points during the class. I already talked a little bit about the badges. This is for student 21. They earn 2 badges. Again, that's a student summary. They can get the graph as well. And then this is a sheet that can be sent home. So this is for student 21. Here's their lesson summary where they have 42 minutes and they burned 369 kcals. They had a target of 30 minutes and they made 2652 out of that 30 minutes. They had a max heart rate of 169 and an average heart rate of 145. And then it tells them about their training benefits. So depending on how much time they spend in each zone, this will differ on what type of a benefit you got out of that workout. So then there's a course evaluation. It can grade it for you if you set it up ahead of time correctly. And then you can get student detailed reports for each class. And so this is a detailed report of how much time students spent in each zone. This is same thing, just a little bit different picture. So that's pretty much the reports with heart rate. And it's not that you guys are going to have to actually do that, but I think it's important for you to understand that there's so much that you can do with heart rate monitors and being able to send those out to your students. And if you're a physical activity student, these heart rate monitors are used in fitness clubs all the time. So they're used in fitness clubs and NCAA sports. So we're talking NCAA basketball, football, hockey. It's used in pro sports. So pro football, the Atlanta Falcons are a polar heart rate team. So they actually use polar to train, and you'll see even on game days that they're strapped up. So that's pretty impressive. So I think that I obviously love to teach with heart rate. The other thing that I just want to mention, although you're not getting a super detailed information of how to use them or how to teach with them, you'll get that in fitness and instruction. It's important for you to know that you can check out heart rate monitors from us and then use them in physical education when you're student teaching. So if you ever want to teach with heart rate monitors, you're more than welcome to come check out an iPad and check out the heart rate monitors so that you can use them with your students.
So right now, I'm going to briefly talk about using applications in physical education. And when I say applications, I'm really talking about apps that you would see on your phone, on a tablet, or on an iPad. I'm specifically going to talk about iPad apps today, but know that you could integrate some of the same things on Android tablets. So if you're thinking, like if you have a Samsung phone or you have a Samsung tablet, those types of things would work as well. They just might have apps that are called different names, but essentially they're going to be able to do the same thing. So when I talk about the apps today, I'm going to talk uh, within different buckets or areas or types of apps. So the first area that I'm going to talk about are video assessment apps. So video assessment apps can be used in physical education to actually conduct assessment. And so if you think about using video in your physical education classroom, you might think about actually videotaping students and then going back and reviewing it as a teacher and maybe grading them from the video. But you can also get kids involved in using these apps. So you might be able to have a kid self assess, and you can put the app on delay, and they would be able to go and watch their video after they performed a certain task and maybe be able to fill out some type of an assessment rubric on their own. Or maybe you have a friend videotape them and conduct the assessment for them. So there's lots of ways that you can use video assessment apps. Coach's Eye can be used in physical education. It has some upgrades to it that you often see it used in other things such as sports. So, for example, swimming might use it. You might use it in basketball. Really, Coach's Eye gives you ability to kind of diagnose the biomechanics of different movements, and so that is, really nice to have. Another type of an assessment app is called Easy Assessment. So, this is something that is actually designed for physical education teachers, and you're able to put rubrics into the app and able to grade your classes on rubrics within that app. The other like bucket of apps that I'm going to talk about or I want to talk about is called what I deem as make your life easier apps. So these don't really have anything to do with assessment per se, but they're all kinds of apps that essentially you can use to help motivate students and really just to make your life easier so that you can keep on track and run a quality physical education class. So, one of those apps is called Timer Applications. An example of this might be Tabata. So what you can do is you can actually set a timer once, or they have different timer apps that you can set a series of timers. So essentially, if you're doing stations, you can set it so that they do a 1 minute warm up and then it runs 10 stations at 2 minutes each. And between each station, there's 30 seconds of rest time. And then essentially, what will happen is it counts down, and when it's on rest or when it's on go, it'll beep so that students know where they're at. There's an example down here on the page. Another example of make your life easier apps are called music apps. So just using any type of music, you can essentially hook your music to your timer apps too if you get the right type of apps. There's fitness and health apps. So these could be used personally, or you could actually like tell students that they could use these. But I've also found that fitness and health apps to be helpful in the sense of you might be able to find one where they teach yoga or dance, and maybe you don't feel comfortable teaching yoga, but you really want your kids to experience yoga. And so you might use the app as a tool to help teach yoga, and then you can walk around as a teacher and get feedback on performance of what's going on the screen while the kids are following along. You, of course, would never want to put an application on the board and tell the kids to follow it, and then sit and read the paper or something. That would not be quality physical education. So another bucket is productivity apps. So these are things that are going to help make your life easier, but also help you be more productive. So things like attendance, whiteboard apps. So if you don't have a whiteboard in your gym, you can project your iPad up onto the board, and it works just as a whiteboard. You can also get documents to go. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint. All of these things are going to make your life easier as you're using the iPad in PE. And then the last type of make your life easier app are PE lesson apps. So these apps are really designed for teachers to have quick and easy physical education lessons. They're not always the best physical education lessons, but they could be useful to help give you ideas if you're running short on ideas and you've kind of tapped your sources on the internet. The last type of apps that are really useful are apps that help you create QR codes, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the semester. So as part of your assignment for this section of your module, you're going to be asked to go on to the discussion board, and I want you to tell me about some of your favorite apps that you might be able to use in physical education. So I'm going to upload a document that actually gives you a whole bunch of different apps that you might be able to use in physical education. This is a collection of apps that I have gathered over the years. Some of them are from websites that people think are useful for the physical education setting, or some of them are from myself, and some of them are from teachers recommending them to me. So essentially, you have this long list of apps that you're going to be able to look over, and I really want you to look at them and maybe download some of the free ones. And then on the discussion board, you're going to be asked to talk about 3 different apps that you think might be useful in physical education, and talk about why you think they might be useful. Lastly, you're going to comment on your peers in the apps that they suggest. And so I want you to find 2 peers, and I want you to comment on their posts about apps and see if you can find something interesting that you didn't know, or maybe find an app that you weren't familiar with.